Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Got a number of people joining us here as we look to kick off our distracted driving awareness presentation. As we get going here today, a couple reminders. Feel free to make a chat question in the chat box. Everyone is in muted mode right now, so myself, Dana Vorholt, Director of Risk Engineering, Sherry Walker, Director of Claims, and Ryan Walker, our data analyst, will be joining us today to talk about some of the areas related to distracted driving awareness. And keep in mind, this is not a defensive driving presentation. What we're doing here today is creating awareness about distracted driving. And some of the measures that you can take will be in a later training class, but for today's purposes, we want to bring attention to a number of issues that we see on this topic. So we're not trying to make you feel bad, because there's a good chance and high likelihood that people on this call right now are part of the problem. And I will admit I'm not perfect, and I sometimes too have my weaknesses in this area. So as a presenter here today, taking accountability for our actions behind the wheel, I promise you will make you a better driver and also allow those around you using the same roads to be safer as well. So as we kick this off, April is National Distracted Driving Awareness Month. Like all great programs that come to fruition, this too stems from a tragedy. In 2008, a young girl was struck on her bike about 15 pedals from her house. She almost made it home. Unfortunately, she was hit and killed by a distracted driver. The mother did not take that in vain and used her voice and took her words all the way to Congress. The U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution 1186 designating April as National Distracted Driving Awareness Month. This bill was passed 410 to 2. And since April 2010, we've had this month to take the time to provide increased awareness and education on this topic. If you're wondering who might have voted against that, you'd have to look in the states of Illinois and Texas. That said, let's continue here today and learn a few things and hope to get better on this topic. By the numbers, and as you heard us, we do have a data analyst in the room, so we look at a lot of numbers. Sentinel take great pride in being able to create a portrait from numbers and help our clients and those folks who have these particular exposures to become better. And if we look at that 4,990 fatalities, we can tell you that it has a much greater and deeper ripple effect. We have in the US, the average citizen has 3.14 people in their family. I do not take a lot of solace in knowing that we have had a reduction of 3.6 year over year in fatalities, and also 2 straight years of fatalities on the roadway. But again, if you think about the average person having 3.1 family members, there's a lot more coworkers, families, cousins, neighbors, coworkers, the people that are involved for any single one of those individuals that lost their lives. Looking at this next one, from distracted driving, 3,308 was the number of people that were killed by distracted driving. Now, those aren't just the people in the vehicles. Nearly 20% of those people of that 3,308 lost their lives outside of it. So pedestrians just riding their bike, like we mentioned earlier, walking down the road, just living life were taken away from us from these actions. Then lastly, we look at the average distraction. To further expand on this 5 seconds average distraction time, we tell you that for every hour you drive, you have roughly 1 minute and 4 seconds worth of distracted driving. Now, if I tell you to put a blindfold on for about 1 minute and 4 seconds per hour, my guess is you would say that's crazy. And essentially, that's what we're doing when we're looking down at our cell phones. And keep in mind, cell phones are the easiest target here. There are other distractions that go back to the signs of billboards when we didn't have our phones in our hands, to radios, to putting on makeup, and even some folks have seen people driving and reading the newspaper. Okay, we'll move on. Now, this is a little bit of a rhetorical question, but if you think about what is the biggest risk you will take today, I can tell you that statistically, the biggest risk is getting in your vehicle and driving today from work to work, pick up your loved one, and anything you might be able to do. If we see this chart right here, it leads us to say that we actually have had an uptrend over the last 10 years. And then we actually did, as I noted earlier, have 2 straight years of declines. But I will tell you, for the folks on this phone, you don't necessarily have to be a decision maker to have change. The #1 category of fatalities in the workplace is driving a vehicle by a long shot. The 6th leading cause of non-fatal workplace injuries is driving. So there's a lot to lose here. And I'll take a moment and provide some levity, because sometimes in webinars, you have all this information come at you and say, what does it mean to me? I was lucky enough to sit in on a concept called the capacity model. And what that simply means is if you build in some capacity on your day-to-day life, and for me, that's actually making it from point A to point B, not being distracted. And I'm with all those on this call by saying it is not always easy. You get phone calls, you get work emails, you get things that you become distracted with because it's right there in your hand. But I can tell you that this capacity model will give you time to get in your vehicle to make that text. It'll give you time to set that GPS before you start driving. And this model has an interesting acronym called STICKY, S-T-K-Y. And for the few that may be offended by this, apologize in advance, but I know most of you on here. Is STICKY, S-T-K-Y, stands for shit that'll kill you. And if we look in our industry, we see this happen day in, day out. Again, there's a reason why we have laws in place. There's a reason why we shouldn't text and drive. And these numbers right here represent those people that have lost their lives to the actions that some people have taken by being distracted. So remember that as you go down the path and the road today. And if you were one of the ones that are part of this, and I'm sitting here raising my hand, I want to become a better driver each and every day, and it takes accountability to do that. That good news on that last piece there of the trending down, perhaps it is technology. And on the way here, I was compelled not to take a picture of a Tesla driving down the road and looking at a cell phone and had no hands on his wheel. I hope that we don't have this conversation in 10 years and we're training on a different topic. That would mean technology has advanced so much that we can take the human element out of this, because most of the time it is the human element that's creating some of these bad decisions, such as distracted driving. Sometimes you have to look back to look ahead. Early examples of distracted driving studies go back as far as 1963, when scientist John Sanders took a road and he was blindfolded, all in the name of research. The Bureau of Public Roads, now the Federal Highway Administration, tasked him with investigating how much time a driver had to spend looking at the road to drive effectively. To gather his data needed, Sanders hopped into his vehicle and drove in midday traffic on I-49 in Massachusetts. The twist here, he was wearing a motorcycle helmet that was sandblasted with an opaque shield, which actually would trigger every now and then a little bit, probably about a half a second, would pop down electronically. So he was driving blindfolded for bits of time with the shield down for about a half second at a time and popping back up. He actually figured out that you can take a map mentally with your brain so you can see things, but as we move forward, a lot would actually change. And in 1983, the introduction of the cell phone was that path that changed a lot of things and created a greater amount of risk for all of us on the roads. Now, it wasn't prevalent and probably until the last 10 years. But now with over 300 million people in the United States having cell phones, at any given moment during the day, we have more than 800,000 vehicles that are being driven by someone who has a handheld cell phone in their vehicles, which is a scary fact if you think about and compile that data to all the distracted elements and drivers that we have. Now, again, we have made a lot of progress. We have those 49 states that have banned texting and driving, but the fact remains this is something that's been around for a while, and we all tend to get a little better at things the more we practice this. I used this example the other day. I wasn't good at foul shots until I was made to start making foul shots, and my team would run when I missed those foul shots. The more we are on our phone, the more comfortable we are doing tasks related to work, personal things, email, the better we feel like we get. And I would say here, those folks on this particular call, the average distraction has actually increased for you all if you think about when cell phones first become prevalent. So we see a correlation from 2013, when we actually had a decline for 10 straight years on roadway fatalities, and then it all changed with the smartphone. Again, most of us have a smartphone. It does a lot of things smart. The stupid thing within that is actually taking that time to be distracted. And I'll again say this, I have been distracted before. I have had close calls. As we go back to the purpose of this particular webinar, it's not to make you feel bad, it's to educate you on the accountability and the actual consequences of what happens when we're distracted. Now I'm going to flip it over to a poll question, simple poll question, and we're going to ask you all to be engaged here and allow yourself to answer this one question. As you think about answering that question, took guesses on where it would be, and I'll tell you the answer of this. We might all not have an incident where we know someone who was distracted and was in an accident, or ourselves was involved in an accident from being distracted. But I can tell you right now, sitting in a room and sitting next to someone that has been impacted by this. We're going to let Sherry talk about that once this poll closes up and we get through a few more slides. Preliminary results coming in. We got roughly 64% who have not or who have known someone, and 36% who have not known someone or themselves been involved. So we got essentially 2/3 of the audience involved here today in this webinar who can attest and say that they have been involved or know someone. And again, these numbers I expect to balance out, especially as technology improves. But when you get in that vehicle, know that these distractions, they tempt you and they want you to be there and they want you to answer it. It is not worth that life. We go back to the lady who lost her daughter and all the work that she has done to help prevent this and create this awareness that we're talking about here in April. Some of the reasons we text and drive, go into having that. First of all, it's always there. And again, when we look at it always being there and knowing that I have a decision to make to take that text, to take that email, to take that call, we have to understand there are and will be areas for opportunity and room for improvement. So if we look at this little graph coming in, room for improvement, next 2,600 miles. I did a little study today as I drove 1 hour and 15 minutes from Mooresville to Greensboro. And what I noted is within the first 30 seconds of me being on the freeway, we had a vehicle that darted over 4 lanes going about 75 miles an hour, had 1 disabled vehicle, had 1 accident, and we had a lot of debris on the roads, which quickly reminded me that I'd rather not be looking at my cell phone for that 1 minute and 4 seconds over the course of an hour and have that full attention when we're driving vehicles that weigh on average 3,000 pounds, and many on this call have vehicles that are loaded down, heavy, some carrying bricks, some carrying construction materials, weighing in the tens of thousands of pounds. So that room for improvement is real, and understanding that having attention and keeping that sticky concept in your mind and getting back to your loved ones is a lot of times pretty easy if you do the right things. And again, it's not always you. It can sometimes be that other person, as I found out today. And I hate to say this, it's become normalized in our world to figure out that people sometimes driving reckless are going to have a cell phone in their hand. That in itself has been normalized, and it's unfortunate. Even though there are laws in place, I feel like there still isn't the punishment that quite fits the crime in this situation. Okay, now that hand represents a few things. It represents your ability to take action and recognizing there is room to improve. That area for opportunity does exist in most of us, and as much as I tried here today, driving this hour, I found myself tempted. You know, you have a text message pop up, you have something pop up, and a lot of us might have technology now, such as Apple CarPlay, that allows you to see this. It's hard not to glance, but you have to have mind over matter on these areas and take that hand and put it back on the wheel. Why we text and drive? I'm gonna tell you, it's quite simple. It's always there, and we always have it. I can't think of the last time I've done any major transaction or any form of communication in a lot of ways that I need documentation for that I haven't used my cell phone, right? And as much as we like to communicate with our partners over the phone, there are certainly some times where we just have to text, and there's certainly some times when we're out in the field where we know we have to get back to that client and customer. Next up, it's easy. Sorry, Mom, for saying this, but I would rather sometimes text my mom than have her talk to me for 45 minutes about some aunt, cousin that I may have never met in my life. But at the same time, there are reasons out there that make it so easy why we do it. That's one example. I'm sure you could find your own. The next one, it's quick. We like in this society to make a quick impact, be done with it, set it aside, and deal with it again. Next on this, it's so convenient. I remember literally probably sending my first text and thinking, man, this is such a great thing. How easy is this? You can have concise, quick conversations without getting those long drawn discussions. But at the end of the day, it's convenient until it's not. And I can tell you some of those situations for some of those individuals that passed away, it might have been quick, it might have been easy. But the next one here, I'll tell you, it's dangerous. We sat through a defensive driving presentation last week with one of our partners, and it was a very powerful video. The mother had sent a text message to her daughter, and the daughter opened the text message. So it goes, a lot of times, if you know that person is driving, don't text, because we're also tempted to see what's on the other side of that text. There's real serious problems, and this may sound funny, but they actually have camps that you can go to detach electronically. Again, it's a problem, and I think we've all kind of been there to the point where, hey, we've done some dumb things over the course of time, and a lot of times, unfortunately, especially for those who drive, we find ourselves put in that position of having that choice of yes or no. And my pledge to you all is take the high road here. If you do have to change up or pivot, or if you do have to get important message out, pull over to the side of the road. It's going to benefit you, and likely that ripple effect that we talked about just earlier in the presentation. Now, for the business owners in this, the financial and operational impact. We see the estimated economic cost of all motor vehicle traffic crashes in the United States, approximately $340 billion. Now, I'm willing to bet that most of the people on this call today are less concerned about the financial and operational impact. Certainly it's ranked up there, but they're more concerned with their people. Businesses are hard enough to run these days, to find good people to work. Allowing this type of behavior to go unchecked really is where we like to step in and say, you can do better. You can create policies and procedures. And again, at the end of the day, we're not looking for perfection. We're just looking for improvement. And that's all of us. So policies, procedures, again, the area Sentinel kind of comes in to help with our clients to be more proactive. If you haven't had this discussion, if you hadn't had a look back at your own policy on this, maybe it's time. We look at that $98 billion were approximated from actually this being a result of distracted driving. So again, we're looking at a big number associated and tied back to all this distracted driving, and that leads to lost productivity, that leads to legal and court costs, certainly property damage. Anytime we have a client that has a vehicle out for repairs, that means that vehicle is not making money. We have those medical costs, and certainly insurance is a big part of this. So again, looking back at all this, taking a step 30,000 foot view and realizing there is a bigger impact of this that goes beyond the personal pain and suffering that's created. We have real life business impacts as well. How do we become distracted? Well, there certainly are many types of distracted driving. The first one is taking your eyes off the road. We know, again, when we do this, we're not seeing what we're looking at ahead. We need those eyes to see what's out in front of us. It only takes a few seconds to send a text message. Yeah, that's correct, but it also only takes a few seconds to change your life and the life of others. Cell phones, again, are a big part of this. We see it does through a study through Philadelphia Research Institute that it reduces your attention by as much as 37%. And without having to study this in depth, I can tell you it's pretty easy to know that your ability to drive a vehicle when you're not looking at the road and looking down at your phone does reduce your ability to drive. This next one, taking your hands off the wheel, right? That manual distraction that causes you to remove your hand. These behaviors such as eating, using your cell phone, changing the radio station, or reaching for something else are all examples of taking your hands off the wheel. Again, even with the integration of technology that we have, we are sometimes taking our hands off the wheel to do things we shouldn't do. And quite frankly, a lot of those things probably aren't that important if you look back at it. And lastly, this is one of the bigger ones. Me and my coworker here had this discussion this morning about the impact of taking your mind off the road. There are studies out there, and it's the beautiful thing about studies, you can analyze them and they tell us more. You can send one text message and it actually be and weigh on your mind for the next 20 minutes. So again, we have that cognitive impact of taking your mind off the road and having that visual distraction paired with that manual distraction really becomes a recipe for disaster. And it's why those 40,000 plus people that sometimes go out there to drive don't come back. This next one, looking at the root cause of distractions. Now, I can tell you that we've talked about a lot of these vehicle settings. Many of us might have had family in this past weekend going to Easter, eating. I drive a lot. I certainly eat a lot. And then it comes down to it. I find myself in situations where I've got to get point A to point B. Rubbernecking. We're all inquisitive to figure out, what caused that wreck that made me sit out there for 45 minutes. Try getting in a new vehicle and getting a rental car and figuring out. No, sometimes it's hard to even figure out how to turn it on, as a coworker found out. But trying to find the radio settings. These all become part of that distraction that we want you to prevent and avoid. If we think about that capacity model, get situated, get set. Don't become a statistic and think about that sticky mindset. And if we go back to the root cause of this, we're going to look at this and we're going to tell you, most of the time are going to be the one responsible for not doing a lot of these things when it comes to these distractions. Again, we talk about the cell phone being a primary distractor because it's so much part of our life, but there's a lot more going on. And if you think about what it takes to drive a vehicle, you have to make roughly 50 decisions per minute when you're driving. That's putting on your blinker, that's changing lanes, that's accelerating, that's decelerating, that's trying to get around that sunblock that you can't see, or someone merging. So there's a lot of things that we have to use our mind for. And certainly our minds are, we're thankful enough that we can make decisions and multitask, but we as people aren't great multitaskers if you look at the actual statistics. If you adopt a just drive mentality, and we've seen countless campaigns, I'd hope to say that some of these have effect. Hopefully here today, some of the discussions, and we'll talk real life here in a second, and impactful is what we try to be. Just drive. And a lot of times it's just a text. It's just a short trip. It's just one drink. It's just a picture. It's just a glance. There's so many things. People, if you're buying a house, it's so easy to get on Zillow. If you're buying a car, It's so easy to see if that car is still there. We all have emails coming to our phones now. So it's just there. And what we have to realize, you can just drive, and I challenge you all to do that. That just drive mentality, we talk about 3 seconds, nearly 80% of crashes and 60% of near miss crashes involve some form of driver inattention within 3 seconds before the event. If that isn't some powerful information for you to put your phone down or figure out ways, and we'll talk more about those, to be better and use that technology, then there's probably not a lot that's going to change your perspective on how you drive. And we'll just have to be cognizant, us as the other drivers, for those action behaviors that you have to take. I want to click this over to Sherry Walker, and she's going to bring in the real life piece of it. Sherry?
Thank you, Dana. So I am unfortunately one of that 2/3 of us that knows or has been in a distracted driving accident. Oftentimes when we see claims, it is because of distracted driving. I want to preface this by saying that I'm about to show some photos from some claims that I have actually been the handling adjuster for, and some of these photos can be difficult to look at. So just wanted to give you all a warning before we move into this. So there's multiple ways to be distracted, and this is what we call the bagel car. This gentleman was on his way to work and had picked up a bagel with cream cheese on it and was eating his bagel as he was going down the interstate. He dropped his bagel. He leaned over to pick it up because he was concerned about the cream cheese getting into the fabric of his floorboard. And when he bent over, he unfortunately ran off the road and struck a tree. Ironically enough, he had a hard time getting in touch with me. He reached out to me and he said, I don't know where my cell phone went. It was in the center console when I was driving, and now I can't find it anywhere. I couldn't find it when they pulled me out of the car. I actually located his cell phone lodged in the roof, the headliner of the roof. So I had to pry it out of the roof to take it back to him. And of course it was no good at that point, but there's so much that moves around inside a car when you have this kind of accident. It's very easy. He had some fairly severe injuries, but luckily was okay. This next one is the claim that I did not work, but that was very, very close to me. This is the day I almost lost my best friend. She was driving down the road and I had been on the phone with her, and that was a distraction that I should not have had, and neither should she, but we get very complacent when we spend a lot of time in cars. In the process of us hanging up, she figured she wanted to look down at her GPS to ensure that she was going down the correct street. And when she looked down at her GPS, she ran off the road into a ditch and struck a culvert and rolled this vehicle over. You can see in that photo on the right that there is a tire missing. The impact from this accident caused that tire to go completely across the field that you see in that left photo. It was found by another person that came to the scene after the fact. Now, I am very fortunate that my best friend is still alive today and is in good shape, but she did suffer some fractures to her spine after this, and it was a very scary time to get that phone call 5 minutes after we had hung up to say, hey, I'm okay, I think, but I just wrecked my car. So I hope that none of you are ever on the receiving end of that phone call with someone that you love being in this type of impact. Now, this was one of the hardest claims that I have worked. The next two that we're going to talk about involve fatalities. Again, we've talked about the fact that there's multiple ways to be distracted. There were 4 motorcycles here that were traveling. They had gotten off the side of the road because there was an issue with one of the bikes. So they had pulled over onto the side of the highway off of 40 in Greensboro. Unfortunately, around that same time, there was a long distance truck driver that was coming down 40 that had been driving for a significant amount of time that fell asleep. He exited the road. in his sleep and struck all of these vehicles. Out of these 4 motorcycles, there were 2 fatalities that resulted from this. So it is very easy to not just hit other drivers on the roadway, but you have to be mindful of the fact that sometimes vehicles can be on the side of the roadway as well. Now, this next claim, there were multiple ways that the at-fault driver of this accident was distracted. He was traveling down the road at approximately 90 miles an hour. When this accident occurred, this is the vehicle that he struck. This is the Jeep that he was driving that rolled over so hard that not only did it roll over the previous vehicle, it left gouges out of the asphalt. The driver of this vehicle was found to have a significant blood alcohol limit that was pulled by an actual blood draw and returned at 2.2, which is 3-4 times the legal limit. They also found his cell phone, which was ejected from the vehicle, and he was in the middle of a text when his phone flew out of the window. He never saw the stop sign. He never saw the other vehicle that was crossing at the stop sign. At 90 miles an hour, intoxicated and texting, he took the life of a pastor, grandmother, and upstanding member of the community that we will never get back. So just to show, it's one thing to see a video, it's one thing to see a commercial. These actually happen, and I can tell you that having worked on these claims, these are cases that I will never forget and will never walk away from, and working these types of accidents has changed the way that I drive.
We're gonna queue up a video to bring it further into perspective on the impact that it have. And many people go to work thinking that they're going to come back, and then you find out that your life's changed forever. So we've seen an increase in prosecutions, certainly seen an increase in these situations. We have to also remember that we have these things called nuclear verdicts that we have to contend with. And nuclear verdicts have the ability to obviously have fatalities involved, but negligence when it comes to your business you work for. Again, you could be a business owner on this webinar, or you could be a brand new employee starting today, and you have the ability to bring this up. So we're going to cue this video and let you all watch.
Powerful videos, powerful stories. Unfortunately, this is real life. I mean, 2/3 of the people on this call have known or been in an accident related to distracted driving. Unfortunately, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of these types of videos and stories out there by just doing a quick Google search. Changing the way we think is the first step. And for me, it's about having a different mindset. You see the 7 quotes or slogans on this screen, and my personal favorite is "Don't tempt fate, that text can wait." It's really about playing percentages. It is not worth it, and no text, no phone call is worth it. Like Dana said earlier, it's about getting from point A to point B. Whenever you are behind the wheel, that is the only thing at that time that matters, is going from point A to point B. So the next question is, how do we get better? What can we do together to make a difference? Stowing your phone, that's easy. Putting it in your door pocket, putting it in your purse, putting it in your center console. These are all ways for us to lessen the desire to look at our phone should a text come through or a phone call come through. Putting your phone in driving mode. I know for my Apple phone, it's called Focus. I know for Androids and for Googles, they all have similar modes. Depending on how in depth you change the settings, this allows a phone call or text message to come through as quiet, meaning you will not be alerted to a phone call or that text message that comes through, you will not be prompted. Depending on how in depth you set the settings, even a phone call can then go straight to voicemail. So it's a good idea to think about your phone that you have, putting it in driving mode or focus mode. Avoiding multitasking. Whether we are getting in our cars, driving somewhere, we're running behind, so we're getting a quick bite to eat, grooming ourselves, putting on lipstick, texting, having a Zoom call, adjusting our radios. These are all things that I know I've done and I know we've all done. So it's about taking the pledge to just drive. Plan your route ahead of time. If anyone who knows me, I'm never late. I am always early no matter where I go. Putting in directions before you leave a parking lot, before you're driving to that new appointment, before you're driving out of town. So that way you're not tempted as you drive to have to put in directions if you forget where to go. Going to and from the office, to and from an appointment, a meeting, dinner, or my favorite, the golf course, right? Our only goal is getting there safely, point A to point B. Nothing else matters if we do not get there. Creating a distracted driving policy is something that many on this call, Sentinel has helped with. And for those who are new to Sentinel on this call, this is something that we can help you with, getting those templates and helping you review them, edit them, go into legal counsel before implementing those changes. And these policies can easily be added to a fleet safety manual for your company. Introducing telematics. For those who don't know what telematics is, the quick, easy, short version is it's a way to measure your driving. Whether it is a department at your business, whether it is your business as a whole, it's a way to measure driving based on things such as harsh braking, rapid acceleration, taking a turn or a corner too fast, even having a GPS location of a vehicle. In my past life, we had a vehicle stolen from one of our team members' houses, and because we had telematics installed in that vehicle, within 24 hours, our firm was able to find that vehicle and locate it and bring it back to our shop safely. So having telematics is paramount. Obviously, as much as you know, it bodes well for carriers. It has a good look. So you can also create benchmarking within your own business of how your drivers are. If you see that 2 or 3 of your drivers are rating in the 70s versus the other drivers you have are in the 90s, then you know you can work with those couple drivers to figure out why their scores are low and how to get their scores up more. Taking the pledge, this is something that I urge each of you, not just one trip, not just one day, not just a week, not just a month, but let's take this pledge and let's take it from now on. Create this change, adopt a new mindset, being part of the solution, and let's put it into distracted driving. We have one more poll question. Did you text the last time you were driving a vehicle?
And while that question was up, Ryan can go back and look at all that we discussed here today. And we use the word all of us, likely all of us, have been a distracted driver. And we'll let this poll tell us how many have been distracted the last time you were in a vehicle. I'll tell one little personal story and we'll end this. I was dropping my son off at daycare, giving a kid a high five. A week later, this person was coming home and they were in their car seat, parents driving on a Sunday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, about as safe time as you can drive in any city, really. And unfortunately, a vehicle going excessive speeds, also distracted, struck the vehicle from behind, rolled their vehicle, and the kid did not make it. He was killed in that impact. And I would say that we have these discussions and realize that we all can make a difference. We all can be better. And it goes back to the accountability. And as I read this, did you text and drive the last time you were driving a vehicle? We have a high percentage of yeses. And we actually have a higher percentage of no's. So 37% of you admitted to this. We thank you for your honesty. We have another 62% that's changed a little bit that said no. So I am proud when I see that focus message come on. There's several of you on this particular webinar that I've sent that out. It makes me proud to know that you're taking those steps to not be distracted and being proactive. We talk about being proactive a lot. So don't let something happen to you all and realize that we all do have this within us to be better. So take advantage of technology. Reach out to Sentinel. Reach out to whoever you work with from a risk management capacity. We're always welcome and open to work with clients when it comes to getting better. We realize that this particular line of coverage as an industry has gone up tremendously from a cost perspective. That's for 2 reasons. The cost of vehicles are going up and the increased number of distracted drivers on the road. We're all paying the price from a premium standpoint for these events. So we want to close this out by thanking you all for being here today. We appreciate any questions you all might have. We'll get back to you individually, and stay safe out there and share the word and the message on April being National Distracted Driving Awareness Month. And you all be careful. Thank you so much.